everybody. I'm Dr. Matt, but I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm a researcher who studies crime, disorder, and extremism. Today we're going to cover Rick Martin, a well known sovereign citizen, and his quote unquote traffic book.
I don't go anywhere without this. This is my traffic book right here. And if you read down below, public servant officer, it pretty much says to him, when a cop pulls me over, you're losing potato chips. But when a cop pulls me over, the first thing I do is I ask him, what's your emergency and how may I assist you? And he's going to ask for my driver's license and insurance or whatever. And I said, well, before we go there, I need you to fill this out. And I take that sheet of paper out of there and hand it to him. Before we can go any further, you need to fill this out. Once he reads this, it already puts him on notice that I'm not playing games with him.
Fill this out? Are you serious? Asking a cop to fill out anything isn't putting him on edge because you're, quote, not playing games with him. He's on edge because you're requesting something nonsensical, particularly when the document asks for extremely irrelevant information. If you zoom in, it starts asking questions about the number of passengers, whether they're engaged in commerce or not. And these are just completely irrelevant when you're actually talking about traffic infractions. In most sovereign citizen ideology, they have this perception that you have to be engaged in commerce in order to need a license plate or a driver's license. But in fact, none of that is actually true. They're citing laws and Supreme Court decisions that have nothing to do actually with driving.
Then you open up the book, and that is so poignant. And here's the case I won against Harris County. Harris County, I always take my name out because I'm not going to give my name until
Rick Martin. Your name is Richard Martin. Because remember, you run the Constitutional Law Group, which you also call Rick Martin Lawyer as your website.
Until you can give me what's called, and police always call it, it's RAS. What's your RAS? And they automatically assume I'm a cop because I'm using their lingo. And what RAS stands for, reasonable articulable suspicion that I've committed a crime. Okay, you don't have that? Okay, what's your SAF, single articulable fact? Well, you don't have that either? Okay, you've just basically said that there's no reason to pull me over because you haven't seen a crime. Okay, here's the case I won against Harris County. You can see the stamps and date, and they ended up buying me a brand new Porsche 911 Turbo all-wheel drive convertible.
This is just a statement that he filed with the Harris County District Clerk in 2017. In fact, if you search for Richard Martin, Rick Martin, Martin Rick, Martin Richard, there is no civil suit filed in 2017 with the District Clerk in Harris County. I actually went back and looked through every single civil suit that anyone with the last name Martin had filed since 2015, and there's nothing that even looks like this. In fact, all he's showing you is this nonsensical document that he has created to try to actually show people that he won a lawsuit. He didn't. There is no lawsuit. There never has been a lawsuit, and it's unlikely that they were even willing to accept any lawsuit that was written in that format.
With them pulling me over and letting me spend a night in jail. So, and here's the lawsuit, and I've got these for everybody to see, and you can see that it's all put together, and there it is, signed by the DA and stamped, showing they lost the case.
Wait, so did the clerk sign it, or did the district attorney sign it? Because that essentially says that the clerk signed it, that I, blank, clerk of the county of blank, thereof do hereby certify the citizen named above has sworn to the contents of this document. It doesn't even mention a district attorney. In fact, if you actually zoom in on that seal, it's just essentially a seal of the County Criminal Court at Law. It's with a date of January 23rd, 2017. This isn't a lawsuit. This is essentially just an affidavit of fact. Essentially, what you are alleging under the penalty of perjury is true. It's not a lawsuit, and it, again, was never a lawsuit based on the current public documents for Harris County.
And they lost it, and they paid
And
you
I
what?
sued them.
And what did you win?
$250,000 for a night in jail.
$250,000 for a night in jail. Where's the final judgment? How about the car? The check? Anything other than what reads as a statement and not an actual lawsuit that has a plaintiff and a defendant would probably be more useful than this random document that you're proclaiming. If you actually look into Harris County, there are no lawsuits. There's no evidence that any lawsuit ever existed. There was nothing in local media. There's nothing on the clerk of court's website. When in fact, the largest lawsuit related to the county, which was related to bond and bail, was actually occurring in 2017. So another lawsuit like this would have made pretty decent headlines in the local community, but it didn't. And that's because there was no lawsuit.
And then Supreme Court says no license necessary to drive an automobile on public highways. Now these are all documented. So what this is called stare decisis, okay? We're running a case that's already been won in the Supreme Court, and they're in violation of their oath of office when they don't pay attention. My license plate doesn't give you, if you look at my license plate, the license plate alone says I'm not in commerce. Now, if I have a license plate like this car over here and that car over there, they all have license plates. License plates mean I'm engaged in commerce. I'm not engaged in commerce.
Okay, so say that I buy that you don't need a license plate to engage in commerce. You're saying you're not engaged in commerce? Ultimately, that's a question for Rick. So then, if that's the case, if he's not engaged in commerce, why does his SUV have a logo for his business on the side of it, for him being a legal counselor? Wouldn't that mean that this is a commercial vehicle, but it's because it's being used for your work to promote and work for your business? Therefore, you're violating your own conditions by having that logo on the side of your SUV. Huh.
This doesn't give them the authority to pull me over because they see that. Where do you see that I'm engaged in commerce? What gave you that suspicion that I'm engaged in commerce?
I don't know, Rick. How about the business logo that you have as a magnet attached to the driver's side door of your car?
You have the right to travel freely unencumbered, and that's all in the law. And when we look at the law books, Supreme Court has already ruled on this. And you go back to what is a license. And I want people to do their own homework. Go read the case of Murdoch versus Pennsylvania.
Sovereign citizens love to toss around random court cases. So instead of actually just listening to them, we're actually going to deep dive into them so that way you can understand what the court case he's actually referring to is. So, Murdoch v. Pennsylvania is a 1942 freedom of religion case. In Jeanette, Pennsylvania imposed a law that individuals had to apply for and receive a license to solicit door-to-door. Murdoch and 7 other people, who were all Jehovah's Witnesses, were going door-to-door asking for monetary contributions in exchange for religious literature. The city required the Jehovah's Witnesses to pay the licensing fee in order to go door-to-door. However, they ended up suing the town because the Jehovah's Witnesses believed that going door-to-door was part of its worship, and after multiple rounds of appeals in the Supreme Court, they actually struck down the licensing requirement as it infringed on the right to religion. This wasn't a licensing over driving vehicles code. This was a licensing over going door-to-door to sell things. And because Jehovah's Witnesses go door-to-door, the Supreme Court determined that by having a licensing requirement for them would violate their freedom of religion. This has nothing to do with motor vehicles whatsoever.
Or read the case of, Shuttlesworth versus the city of Birmingham, Alabama.
Shuttlesworth v. City of Birmingham is a 1969 Supreme Court case. In 1963, a black minister and 52 members of his congregation applied for a permit in Birmingham, Alabama for a civil rights march. The city refused the permit and outright stated that they would never issue a permit to the group to march. The United States Supreme Court found that preventing the right of free expression in public places was unconstitutional because the permit or licensing process was discriminatorily enforced against African American groups, particularly civil rights groups. Ultimately, Rick Martin's cases that he's tossing out here had nothing to do with driver's license and everything to do with permitting, and were ultimately related to freedom of religion and freedom of association and free expression. They have nothing to do with driver's licenses. They have nothing to do with vehicles. They're essentially cherry picking these cases and say you don't need a permit or a license to do something that has nothing to do with driving an automobile or a vehicle.
These are showing that you don't need a license. A license is to do something that is immoral, that's sanctioned by the government, like a 007 license to kill. Okay, that's immoral. They need to be licensed by the state. In other words, they're protected by the state on that. There's nothing immoral about leaving my house to go get a gallon of milk. I only need a license if I'm using the public property. The roadways are public, and they're paid for by the gas tax, okay? They're not paid for by traffic violations. So when you get into the law, this is what scares most cops, and I'm gonna get to it here if the wind would stop for 1 second. This is what most cops don't like, because they don't know it. It's non-emergency use of emergency vehicle lights and sirens is a felony. Pulling me over for a traffic violation, they just committed a felony. And if they don't have reasonable suspicion that I'm engaged in commerce, they're done. And I'll bring out...
Police officers are able to use their emergency lights to effectuate a traffic stop. There's nothing that precludes them from doing that. The argument that you just made is if a police officer used it to get around traffic so they could make it back to the station to clock off for the night. Ultimately, they have the ability and the authority to use those lights to effectuate traffic stops, to warn other drivers, to get faster to locations. The argument that you're making is not logical in any sense.
I'll bring out my brother's. I'm going to put this away real quick. I want to bring out State Trooper. This was his book that he had in his car. Okay. Texas Criminal and Traffic Law Manual. I went to his car and I made him read this. And you're going to love this. This is out of their own law books. This is the LexisNexis. And it says under section 502.003, registration by political subdivision prohibited, except as provided by subsection B. A political subdivision of this state may not require an owner of a motor vehicle to register the vehicle, pay a motor vehicle registration fee, or pay occupational tax or license fee in the connection with the motor vehicle. This section does not affect the authority of a municipality to, right here, license and regulate the use of a motor vehicle for compensation. So,
all right, let's break this down in small increments so even a toddler can understand this. In the state of Texas, a political subdivision represents the county, the city, the town, or an unincorporated area between them, right? This law is essentially arguing that only the state and not the political subdivision, so the city, the town, the county, etc., can establish licensing requirements, registration requirements. The only exception is that local municipalities can impose restrictions on commercial vehicles and commercial traffic. The law prevents jurisdictions like Austin, Houston, Dallas, or my previous residence, Harris County, from imposing its own driver's licenses and motor vehicle registration requirements. The code does not absolve you from a license or registration. It just prevents every city or county in Texas from requiring its own license and registration. He essentially skips the central part of it that states that the state of Texas and not any political subdivisions can have these requirements. He's just skipping over and cherry picking the pieces and stating, well, it says that nobody can do it. But in fact, it's expressly stating that the state of Texas can and not the political subdivisions.
So if I'm not engaged in compensation, being paid to go from point A to point B, I don't need a driver's license. I don't need to register my automobile. And it is an automobile.
What about Massachusetts?
All traffic codes are pretty similar because they're all federal.
All traffic codes are similar because they're all federal. So that's why I register my automobile with the Department of Transportation and not the state of Pennsylvania, and carry my United States driver's passport and not my driver's license. It's not logical, Rick. Well, I think that's about all the translation I can take for tonight. If you have any suggestions for other videos you'd like explanations and reactions to, please comment below. I'm Dr. Matt, but I'm not that kind of doctor. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and I will see you next time.